Hi, I'm Greg. I'm here with Adam Met of the band AJR that he formed with his brother's multi-platinum band. They're on tour with Somewhere in the Sky. Just dropped the EP What No One's Thinking, which is absolutely amazing. And for most people, that would be a really great introduction. We could stop there and start talking. But Adam is also also has a PhD in international human rights law and sustainable development. Forgive me, I have to read this. It's such a long set of things. You are a adjunct professor. You run the nonprofit Planet Reimagined with a bunch of other really great people, and you just wrote a book called Amplify about leveraging your learnings from the music industry and growing a band and a brand into activism specifically for you around climate change, but for anyone who's trying to make any kind of change. It's already a national bestseller. So basically, you're three very successful guys in a trench coat pretending to be one person. So it's wonderful for you to take the time to talk with us today. Very excited about that here at the beginning of Climate Week. Just let's start with, what does a day look like for someone who is into so many things like that?
A day when I roll out of bed, I say to myself, what is actually going to bring me joy today? And then I focus on those things. And honestly, it took me a while to get there. And I don't feel like I have to be doing any of the things that I'm doing. Of course, I need to make a living, but I don't feel like I have to be doing any of the things that I'm doing them, but I'm doing all of them because I love them and they make me happy. And honestly, for the last year or so, that's been my guiding principle. I love using the academic side of my brain as much as the creative side of my brain, as much as the fun side of my brain.
That's a great answer. So you do it because you love it.
Yeah.
That's always the best answer.
Yes.
Um, my son and I were huge fans of yours. Everyone in my family is, and his first concert was an AJR concert a couple of years ago. And when he
Wow.
showed up, he was overwhelmed. He was only 12, lots of noise, big crowd, lots of enthusiasm. He loves your music, but he was timid. He was kind of hunched down in his chair. But by the time you guys got around to singing Way Less Sad, he was up on his feet, he was screaming, he was contributing. And I felt that parallel as I was reading your book. It's kind of bringing people from this, I know what I want to do, I know I want to participate place, to standing up and contributing and even leading in, activism space. When did you
Yeah.
start to see the parallels between those two ways of thinking, how you could leverage the thinking from one into another?
This was kind of the core question that I was asking myself because as we were doing the band, I wasn't so much involved in the songwriting, that was my brother's. I was really focused on how do we build a movement, which is this band. And if you think about it, any campaign like rolling out an album or rolling out a tour, it's all the same underlying strategies as building a social movement. And I started to see as I was on these two parallel paths for my weird careers that I was using the same things for both. How do you figure out who your audience is? How do you talk to them effectively? What are the calls to action? How do you build a bigger tent and get more people engaged? How do you create this safe space for them and build this community like you were talking about with your son? That is key for us. So starting with that last one, at our show, yes, it can be big and overwhelming, but at its core, we want to make it a safe space. Even though there are thousands and thousands of people attending these arena shows, we want to make it feel like we are talking to just you. And that's the goal of the music as well. And one of the things that was most important to me is building this book and this idea of Amplify around this metaphor. So, traditionally, in movement building and in music, people think of it as a ladder, right? You hear the song in a supermarket, that's one rung of the ladder. Then you go up the next rung by maybe following an artist on social media. Then you'll maybe go to a show and buy merchandise and you go up and up this ladder. That model doesn't work in 2025 because that assumes you're doing all of these things alone. And with
Mhm. Yeah.
social media and with kind of people moving more in person with community building, that happens now in groups. So the model that is kind of at the center of this book, as you know, is this idea of a hurricane. A hurricane is the model that we need to be using when building social movements and when building music careers in the entertainment space, anywhere you want to build a fan base, in quotes. And this
Mhm.
hurricane model is you start by bringing people who are new as close as possible to the center, give them all the tools to then be shot out into the world across the internet to then be evangelizers and bring other people in. So think of it as this kind of spiral like a hurricane, where that eye of the hurricane is where the new people are, and then they go out in the world to get other people excited about it. That's how a fan base gets built. That's how a social movement builds. And we've seen that time and time again. But as we're thinking about, in particular, the climate movement, we need more and more of that. And so that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing.
That's great. I remember, Um, I remember I read the book like this weekend, so it's not that hard to remember. So I know you were talking about finding people like Mel, like one of your very earliest fans who kind of built the fan base and spun that out into the massive thing that it is today, which is really a fantastic story. Your book is absolutely stacked with amazing guest appearances and interviews and conversations. You have Bill Nye, Ben Folds, you've got Glenn Beck in the same book as Sue Doster. How did you do that, and were there any yeses that you were like, "Really? Oh, sweet. Let's talk."
I mean, Jim Gaffigan being a yes and talking about his fan base, I was honored, like you said, Bill Nye. But I think probably my favorite interview was Glenn Beck because I so vehemently disagree with him on so many issues. And I flew down to Texas for this interview, sat with him for about 4 hours, and we disagreed on everything for 3 hours and 50 minutes. And then it finally took that amount of time to find one thing we agreed on. And I'm not going to ruin it for the people who haven't read the book, but the one thing we agreed on was so specific and so technical. And it just continued to reinforce this idea that if you take the time with people and end up finding something small to connect over, you can then build that bridge. Glenn Beck, for those of you who don't know, really conservative firebrand talk show host, kind of turned the Fox News thing like from Rush Limbaugh into what it is today, right? And Tucker Carlson kind of took up the mantle from him. So, as you can probably imagine, I disagree with 99.9% of his views. But we did find one really important, big, concrete thing we could agree on when it came to climate change. So, go read the book because that conversation was probably the one of the most interesting interviews that I did.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The idea that you can have the conversation at all and that it's such a necessary thing to do to kind of if you wanna make the progress you wanna make, you've gotta talk to even the people that you know you're starting from a really different place. Um, so so somebody who has switched to paper straws and that's their contribution and they're tolerating the soggy straws.
Mhm.
How does that person go from that kind of ticking that box to what's the next step? What's step they've done step 0, maybe begrudgingly because it's the only straw at the Starbucks, and now they go to step 1 to start that journey. What's that easy lift that person does on the in the minute after watching this interview?
So, the first thing I would do is go back to plastic straws.
Mm,
Paper straws are not really going to have any sort of impact. And also, they are terrible. They really have not
yeah.
figured out a good way to make those straws. So, my whole philosophy is not about the kind of straw that you're using. It's not about pledging to go vegan one meal a week. It's about the systemic change that you can have. Now, while obviously it's deeply important to vote for president, the number one thing you could do, and I encourage everybody to do this as soon as you finish watching this video, is to literally put into Google, when is my next local election? The power that community boards and state legislators have, and we've seen this over the last few months, the power that they have is enormous in your day to day life. And in some ways, so much more power than the president has over your day to day life. What public transportation looks like in your community, what zoning looks like. Zoning might not seem sexy, but that zoning laws determine where the next petrochemical plant is put, how roads and highways are built. All of these things are decided at the hyperlocal level. And there was a race last year in Texas for a community board seat where the young woman won by 12 votes, literally 12 votes. Your vote is thousands of times more powerful at the local level than it is at the national level. So please, that's the number one thing you can do. And that should be your next step is go back to plastic straws because that really is not going to have an impact. And voting is the next thing. There's so many more things you can do. There's ways to volunteer for local organizations. There's ways to call your representatives and ask them to vote certain ways. There's signing petitions. All of this local civic work is the way to actually move the needle.
So that's that just getting involved kind of for the first time, real effect you can have locally, especially in states. I know on both sides of the spectrum, some states are never going to change their color. So it kind of feels like, what's the point of getting involved in politics? My state's going to do this. But locally, that's never the case. The world is
Yep.
much more nuanced at the local level. So that's great advice for someone who's just getting started. What do you say to people who are, you mentioned Cassandra in the book. What do you say to people who have been in this fight for a while and are just beat down? They keep saying, I warned you about the Trojan horse, and now the city's filled with Trojans, and now there's wooden horses all the way to the horizon, and they won't stop
Yeah.
coming, and the gates are wide open. How do you stay energized and motivated in this fight?
Yeah, it's a great question because so many young people approach me with climate anxiety, and it is a real issue. It's something that we are all frustrated about what the future might bring or the lack of future might bring. And so when I talk to people about this, one of the things I say is we need to find a small win quickly because those small wins are going to re energize people and reinvigorate people. And those small wins can be something like there are people who are speeding too fast down my street. We need to put in a stop sign. So literally printing out and writing a petition and getting all the neighbors to sign it and delivering it to the city council, finding something that will take you a couple of days to get done and seeing that success and feeling that success, making it small, kind of like the voting, making it small and easier to achieve is the best way. Because climate anxiety comes from and anxiety around any of these issues, whether you're talking about guns or immigration or healthcare, comes from the fact that you're feeling like it is so big and it is so far away and it is impossible for one person to have any impact. So the way to combat that is making it something that you can achieve with your community.
So you obviously have gotten pretty good at keeping the energy up. You do a lot of things. You're already doing so much. The tour, are you on the tour right now? Are you going around with the tour?
Yeah. Yeah. So I am doing a handful of the shows. I'm not doing all of the shows because this summer I've been on my book tour, and I'm doing a lot of stuff around movement building in addition. So um, I'm not going to reveal which other shows I'm coming to because I like it to be a surprise for fans, but I will be doing some more of the shows this year.
Brilliant. And is there anything in your advocacy work that you learned from either of your brothers from that you bring into that side of your life? Or is this kind of like
Yeah.
your big brother project that you're off doing when you're not with them?
This is really my project, but one of the things that I really learned from the three of us being in the band together is the value of storytelling, especially behind the scenes. One of the things that I talk about in the book is that Ryan came up with this concept to teach the audience how we make the songs while we're live on stage. So at every concert, we do this how we made section. And it is one of the most exciting parts of the show because we start with one instrument and layer on another, layer on another, layer on another. And the audience is trying to figure out that whole time, what song is this? What song is this? What song is this? And to create that build, that storytelling and that excitement and that kind of leading to this moment is the same kind of storytelling techniques that I use in movement building. So I learn stuff all the time from what we do on stage and what we do in AJR.
So plenty of stuff going on. You're teaching, writing. Amplify is amazing. You're on the tour. You're on the book tour, two tours. Um,
Yes.
and that doesn't seem to be enough because now I've been told that you're releasing something called the Neo Industrial Revolution. Last night I was watching Lord of the Rings with my family and we watched the extended edition. I know you guys love the behind the scenes. You were just talking about the behind the scenes. Is this your
Yep.
Peter Jackson cut of the book? Is this like a DLC? What do we got?
I love that analogy so much. You have no idea. Um, so the book is really a blueprint, kind of like a guidebook for people to jump in. The neo-industrial revolution, which is now available both in a physical version, which we're giving out for free throughout all of Climate Week. It's going to be under the chair of every person in the audience where I'm giving all these different speeches, and there'll be a digital version also. But it really is the real world implementation of a lot of the strategies from the book. How do we take all of these ideas and make them real? The whole idea behind the neo-industrial revolution is no one cares what climate change is. No one cares what 1.5 degrees is or sustainability. All of those concepts are too far away. So the first big point is we need a new lexicon for talking about it that makes it personal and individual and at the same time really revolutionary. And so in this declaration, we of course we talk about jobs and the economy, but we talk about revamping our transportation systems, our energy systems, our waste, our food, our building, our zoning, all of these things. That is what we need. And so the language is the first piece of it. The second piece of it is this thing that I talk about that's around collective action as opposed to individual action. It was the straw thing that we talked about earlier. How do we reframe this? But this declaration is not, here's how to solve every problem. It's a philosophy. So it's relatively long, but we go sector by sector. We looked at universities and the finance sector and philanthropy and the culture space and big green organizations and activists. And we give concrete strategies for how they all can adopt this new philosophy. The whole declaration starts with the language, we're failing. You probably already knew that, but please don't stop reading. And it's true. In the moment, we are failing. The climate movement is failing. And what it needs is a revamp, a reinvigoration, and a restart. And this is the way to do it. It starts from zero and builds things up in a way without saying, we need to move away from capitalism. Sure, you could say something like that, but that is not realistic in this moment. Sure, you could engage around those kinds of protests, but that's not something that's going to make the change fast enough that we need in order to combat climate change. Let's understand the systems that we're a part of, and let's figure out the right ways in order to move them in the direction that it will take. It's not using the words climate, it's not 1.5 degrees, it's not sustainability. It is this neo industrial revolution. And again, this is pretty broad, but in the declaration, we go so specific with very
Mhm.
concrete recommendations for each of these sectors.
And as I read it, I like that it started from kind of a let's stop trying to talk people into thinking climate change is happening. That
Waste of
conversation,
time.
we've had that conversation. So now
Yep.
let's move on to let's leverage the things that most people believe that already. So now let's leverage the foundation that we've made that case. And now how do we move the conversation down the road in reframing language and perspective? Like you said, philosophy. I thought it was a really powerful approach.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And honestly, much like the book, I hope it is used. And the book, I wanted everyone, of course, to read it. But even more than that, scribble in the margins, rip out pages, take away
Mhm.
things that you like from it, and actually go out in the world and do this stuff because that's what we need. And this declaration is my example of how you can take these strategies and go out and do something with it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You've got the book, which is the toolbox, and maybe the declaration, which is something you can use those tools to build and create. And
Thank you, Greg.
congratulations on the book. It's fantastic, and the declaration, which you've said people can get under the seats at your tour on your book tour,
Climate
and
Week.
you're speaking.
Yes. And
Um,
also, end of next week, you'll be able to get it at neoindustrialrevolution.org.
Adam, thank you very much. Amplify is out now, bestseller, the tour, the album, you're teaching, just so much amazing stuff. I know you said you won't reveal shows you're going to be at, but there's a Hollywood Bowl show in a week, and I hope to bump into you there. I'll be there with my son, who has gone from sitting back in his seat to incredibly excited to go to stand up and scream along with all of you guys. It's his birthday present, so we're looking forward to that. And appreciate you so much taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you so much, and I really hope you enjoy the show.